Angry customer makes waitress cry. Neymar turns her day around. How will this story unfold? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The bustling downtown cafe was a hive of activity, the clinking of dishes and the chatter of patrons filling the air. Amidst the controlled chaos, Carla, a dedicated waitress, moved swiftly from table to table, her feet aching and her brow glistening with sweat. Despite the exhaustion that weighed heavily upon her, she greeted each customer with a warm smile and a kind word. For Carla, this job was more than just a means to an end. Every paycheck she earned went towards supporting her younger brother's education. She had promised her parents, before they passed away, that she would do everything in her power to ensure that he had the opportunities they never did. And so, she pushed through the long hours and the demanding customers, knowing that every sacrifice she made was bringing her one step closer to fulfilling that promise. As the lunch rush reached its peak, Carla could feel her energy waning. She took a moment to catch her breath, leaning against the counter and closing her eyes for just a brief respite. But the moment was short-lived, as the sound of the cafe door swinging open jolted her back to reality. The man who entered the cafe exuded an air of entitlement and impatience. He was well-dressed and well-groomed, his expensive suit and polished shoes a stark contrast to the casual attire of the other patrons. He strode up to the counter, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the menu board. Carla approached him with her usual friendly demeanor, ready to take his order. "Good afternoon, sir," she greeted him. "What can I get for you today?" The man barely glanced at her, his attention focused on his smartphone. "I'll have the house special," he said brusquely, "and make it quick. I have a meeting to get to." Carla nodded, jotting down his order on her notepad. "Of course, sir. I'll have that right out for you." She hurried to the kitchen, placing the order with the chef and grabbing a glass of water for the man's table. But as she made her way back to the counter, she accidentally bumped into another waitress, sending the glass tumbling to the floor with a loud crash. The man's head snapped up, his eyes flashing with irritation. "What's the holdup?" he demanded. "I said I was in a hurry." Carla's heart raced as she quickly cleaned up the broken glass, apologizing profusely to the other waitress. She could feel the man's eyes boring into her back, his impatience palpable. As she approached his table with a fresh glass of water, she could see the anger etched into his features. "I'm so sorry for the delay, sir," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Your order will be out shortly." But the man was not appeased. "This is unacceptable," he snapped, his voice loud enough to draw the attention of the other patrons. "I come here expecting prompt service, and instead I get this incompetence." Carla felt her face flush with embarrassment, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. She tried to apologize again, but the man cut her off. "I don't want your excuses," he said coldly. "I want my food and I want it now. And if you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be working here." The cafe fell silent, the awkward tension palpable. Carla could feel the eyes of the other customers on her, could hear their whispers and murmurs. She wanted nothing more than to disappear, to sink into the floor and vanish from sight. What Carla didn't realize, as she stood there fighting back tears, was that one of the customers had been quietly observing the entire exchange. Neymar, the world-renowned footballer, sat at a corner table, his eyes fixed on the arrogant man and the struggling waitress. Neymar knew all too well the struggles of those trying to make an honest living. He had grown up in a poor neighborhood in Brazil, watching his parents work tirelessly to provide for their family. He had seen the way that entitled customers could treat those in the service industry, as if they were somehow lesser, somehow undeserving of basic human decency. As he watched Carla's shoulders shake with silent sobs, he felt a surge of anger and compassion. He knew that he couldn't sit idly by and watch this injustice unfold. With a calm determination, Neymar rose from his seat and approached the man's table. The cafe fell silent once again, all eyes on the football star as he stood before the arrogant customer. "Excuse me, sir," Neymar said, his voice firm but polite. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation with this young lady." The man looked up at Neymar, his eyes widening in recognition. "Neymar?" he said, his voice suddenly filled with a mix of awe and nervousness. "What are you doing here?" Neymar smiled, but there was no warmth in his expression. "I'm here to enjoy a meal, just like everyone else," he said. "But I couldn't help but notice the way you were treating this waitress." The man's face flushed, his eyes darting around the cafe as if seeking support from the other patrons. "I was just expressing my dissatisfaction with the service," he said defensively. "I have a right to expect a certain level of quality when I'm paying for a meal." Neymar nodded, his gaze never leaving the man's face. "You're right," he said. "You do have a right to expect good service. But you also have a responsibility to treat others with respect and kindness, regardless of their position." He turned to Carla, who was standing nearby, her eyes wide with shock and gratitude. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Carla," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Neymar smiled at her, a genuine warmth radiating from his expression. "Carla, I want to apologize on behalf of this gentleman for the way he treated you," he said. "You deserve better than that." Carla felt tears welling up in her eyes once again, but this time they were tears of gratitude and relief. She had never expected anyone to stand up for her, least of all a world-famous footballer. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice choked with emotion. "You have no idea how much this means to me." Neymar patted her shoulder gently, his eyes filled with understanding. "I know how hard you work," he said. "I know the sacrifices you make to support your family, and I want you to know that your efforts do not go unnoticed." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope, pressing it into Carla's hand. "This is for you," he said. "A small token of my appreciation for all that you do." Carla looked down at the envelope, her brow furrowing in confusion. She glanced back up at Neymar, a question in her eyes. "Open it," he said, his smile widening. With trembling fingers, Carla tore open the envelope. Inside was a check, made out to her, for an amount that made her heart skip a beat. It was more money than she had ever seen in her life, more than enough to pay for her brother's education and then some. Carla stared at the check in disbelief, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. She looked up at Neymar, her eyes wide with shock and wonder. "I can't accept this," she said, her voice trembling. "It's too much." Neymar shook his head, his expression gentle but firm. "It's not too much," he said. "It's what you deserve. You work so hard, Carla. You give so much of yourself to others. This is just a small way of giving back to you." Tears streamed down Carla's face, her emotions overwhelming her. She had never known such kindness, such generosity. In a world that often felt cold and unforgiving, Neymar's act of compassion was like a beacon of light, guiding her towards hope and possibility. The arrogant customer, who had been watching the exchange in stunned silence, suddenly spoke up. I'm sorry," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "I was wrong to treat you the way I did, Carla. I let my own stress and frustration get the best of me, and I took it out on you. That was unacceptable, and I apologize." Carla turned to him, her eyes still glistening with tears. "Thank you," she said softly. "I appreciate your apology." As the man left the cafe, his head bowed in shame, Neymar turned back to Carla. "I know that this money will help you and your family," he said. "But I want you to know that it's not just about the money. It's about recognizing your worth, your value as a human being." Carla nodded, wiping away her tears with the back of her hand. "I've always tried to stay positive," she said, "to keep pushing forward no matter how hard things get. But sometimes it feels like the world is against me, like no one sees how much I'm struggling." Neymar placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch warm and comforting. "I see you, Carla," he said, "and I know that there are others who see you too. You are not alone in this world, even though it may feel like it sometimes." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card, handing it to her. "This is my personal contact information," he said. "If you ever need anything, if you ever feel like you're drowning and need someone to throw you a lifeline, don't hesitate to reach out." I'll be there for you no matter what. Carla took the card, her fingers trembling slightly. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. In the days and weeks that followed, Carla's life began to change in ways she had never imagined. With the money from Neymar, she was able to pay for her brother's education in full, ensuring that he would have the opportunities she had always dreamed of giving him. But it wasn't just the financial burden that had been lifted from her shoulders. Neymar's act of kindness had given her a newfound sense of confidence, a belief in herself and her own worth that she had never had before. She began to stand up for herself more at work, refusing to let entitled customers or demanding bosses treat her with anything less than the respect she deserved. She started to see herself not just as a waitress, but as a person with dreams and aspirations of her own. And as she began to pursue those dreams, she found that doors started to open for her in ways she had never expected. She was offered a scholarship to attend culinary school, a chance to turn her passion for food into a career. She met new people who saw her potential and believed in her, who encouraged her to keep pushing forward no matter what obstacles stood in her way. Through it all, she never forgot about Neymar and the kindness he had shown her on that fateful day in the cafe. She kept his card with her always, a reminder of the goodness that existed in the world, even in the darkest of times. Years passed, and Carla's life continued to blossom in ways she had never dreamed possible. She graduated from culinary school at the top of her class and quickly landed a job at one of the most prestigious restaurants in the city. Her brother, too, was thriving. With the education that Carla had worked so hard to provide for him, he had gone on to become a successful lawyer, fighting for the rights of those who had been marginalized and oppressed. Carla knew that none of it would have been possible without Neymar and the generosity he had shown her all those years ago. She had tried to reach out to him several times over the years to thank him for all that he had done for her, but he had always been busy, always on the move. And so, when she received an invitation to attend a charity gala hosted by Neymar's foundation, she knew that she had to go. She had to see him, to tell him in person just how much his act of kindness had meant to her. The night of the gala arrived, and Carla found herself standing in a room filled with some of the most influential people in the world. She felt out of place, like a small fish in a vast ocean, but she held her head high, knowing that she had earned her place there. And then, she saw him, Neymar, standing on the other side of the room, surrounded by a crowd of admirers. Their eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Neymar excused himself from the group and made his way over to Carla, his smile widening with each step. "Carla," he said, his voice warm and familiar. "It's so good to see you." Carla felt tears welling up in her eyes, the emotions of the moment overwhelming her. "Neymar," she said, her voice choked with gratitude. "I've been trying to reach you for years, to thank you for everything you did for me." Neymar shook his head, his expression humble. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "I only did what anyone would have done in that situation." But Carla knew that wasn't true. She knew that Neymar's act of kindness had been extraordinary, that it had changed the course of her life in ways she could never have imagined. "No," she said, her voice firm, "what you did for me was not ordinary. It was a gesture of greatness, a moment of pure compassion and generosity that I will never forget." Neymar looked at her, his eyes shining with emotion. "I'm so proud of you, Carla," he said. "I always knew that you had greatness within you, that you were destined for more than just waiting tables. And look at you now, a successful chef, a role model for others." Carla felt a sense of pride swelling in her chest, a recognition of all that she had accomplished. But she knew that none of it would have been possible without Neymar and the kindness he had shown her. As the gala continued, Carla and Neymar talked and laughed, catching up on all that had happened in the years since they had last seen each other. Carla told him about her brother and the success he had found as a lawyer. Neymar listened intently, his eyes shining with pride and admiration. "You know," he said, "I always knew that your brother would do great things. With a sister like you supporting him, how could he not?" Carla felt a lump rising in her throat, the words touching her deeply. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said. "Your generosity, your belief in me, It changed everything. Neymar reached out and took her hand, his touch warm and comforting. "Carla," he said, "I want you to know that my act of kindness that day was not just about the money. It was about recognizing your worth, your value as a human being. It was about showing you that you deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, no matter what your job or your circumstances." Carla nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "I know," she said, "and that's what made it so powerful. You didn't just give me money, Neymar. You gave me hope. You gave me the courage to believe in myself, to chase my dreams." Neymar smiled, his expression filled with warmth and affection. "And look at all that you've achieved," he said. "You're an inspiration, Carla, not just to me, but to everyone who knows your story." As the gala drew to a close, Carla and Neymar said their goodbyes, promising to stay in touch. Carla left the event feeling a sense of renewed purpose, a determination to keep pushing forward and making a difference in the world. In the weeks and months that followed, she threw herself into her work with a passion and dedication she had never known before. She began to mentor young chefs, sharing with them the lessons she had learned about hard work, perseverance, and the power of kindness. She also started a charity of her own, dedicated to helping struggling families pay for their children's education. She knew firsthand how transformative that kind of support could be, and she was determined to pay it forward in any way she could. Through it all, she never forgot about Neymar and the role he had played in her life. She continued to stay in touch with him, updating him on her progress and thanking him for all that he had done for her. And then, one day, she received a phone call that would change everything once again. It was Neymar calling from Brazil. He had heard about Carla's charity work, and he wanted to get involved. He had always been passionate about education, he said, and he believed that every child deserves the chance to pursue their dreams, regardless of their background or circumstances. Carla was thrilled by the idea of partnering with Neymar, of combining their resources and their passion to make an even bigger impact. They began to work together closely, developing programs and initiatives that would provide education and support to children in need all around the world. As they worked together, Carla and Neymar's friendship deepened and grew. They had always shared a special bond, a connection forged in that moment of kindness all those years ago. But now, as they poured their hearts and souls into their shared mission, they found themselves drawing even closer together. They spent long hours talking and planning, dreaming up new ways to make a difference in the lives of others. And as they did, Carla began to see Neymar in a new light. She had always admired him for his generosity and his compassion, but now she saw the depth of his commitment, the fierceness of his determination to create a better world. One evening, as they sat together in Carla's office, going over the details of their latest project, Neymar turned to her with a look of intense emotion in his eyes. "Carla," he said, his voice soft and serious, "I need to tell you something." Carla felt her heart skip a beat, a sudden nervousness fluttering in her chest. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Neymar took a deep breath, his gaze never leaving hers. "I love you," he said simply. "I have loved you from the moment I first saw you in that cafe, all those years ago. Your strength, your resilience, your kindness. They have inspired me in ways I never thought possible." Carla felt tears welling up in her eyes, a rush of emotion overwhelming her. She had never dared to hope that Neymar might feel the same way she did, that the connection between them might be something more than just friendship. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw the truth of his words, the depth of his feelings for her, and she knew in that moment that she loved him too. They came together in a kiss that felt like coming home, like the culmination of all the years of struggle and hard work and sacrifice. And as they held each other close, Carla knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, a chapter filled with love and purpose and the power to change the world. Years passed, and Carla and Neymar's love only grew stronger. They continued to work tirelessly on their charitable endeavors, pouring their hearts and souls into making a difference in the lives of others. And as they did, they found that their own lives were enriched in ways they had never imagined. They had their challenges and their struggles, of course. There were times when the weight of the world seemed too heavy to bear, when the problems they were trying to solve seemed insurmountable. But through it all, they had each other and the strength of their love and their commitment to their shared purpose. And so, when the time came for them to stand before their friends and family and pledge their lives to each other, they did so with a sense of joy and gratitude that was almost overwhelming. They knew that they had been blessed with a rare and precious gift, a love that had the power to transform not just their own lives, but the lives of countless others. As they exchanged their vows, Carla looked into Neymar's eyes and saw the same love and devotion that had been there from the very beginning. And she knew, with a certainty that filled her entire being, that this was where she was meant to be, by his side, working to create a better world for all. Their story had begun with a simple act of kindness, a gesture of greatness that had changed the course of Carla's life forever. But it had become so much more than that. It had become a testament to the power of love, to the idea that two people, working together in pursuit of a common goal, could accomplish anything they set their minds to. And as Carla and Neymar stepped out into the world as husband and wife, they knew that they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. They had each other and the strength of their love and their commitment to making a difference. And with that, they knew that anything was possible.